Windows are an important part of the design and heritage character of an old building. They are also one of its most threatened features. Exposed to weather and neglected for long periods, windows are frequently replaced when renovations occur. Old windows may have heritage value, but can they be repaired and upgraded to meet today's requirements?
Windows have heritage value on a number of levels. They are often a major design feature in the facade of the building, sometimes with glazing taking up the majority of the facade. The material of the windows is also an important component of the design. The way the windows were made, there were developments in fabrication techniques and the use of different materials. For example, with steel windows coming into use at the turn of the century, and wooden windows, which have been a popular material for centuries. In conservation work, we have a number of reasons to argue for the retention of historic window assemblies. The heritage value, the aesthetic value of the window to the overall composition. We have policies in the federal government context that talk about the retention of maximum original material. Things get more difficult when we're confronted with owners or property managers who are talking only about the performance factor of windows as part of the building envelope. And sometimes we've lacked the ammunition to argue on those levels about the retention of old windows.
I work for the National Capital Commission as a design architect. Over the last almost 10 years, I'd say, we have accumulated a great deal of experience in the area of window repair and restoration. Our task in promoting restoration has not always been easy. In terms of convincing project managers, our clients here at Rideau Hall, as well as other clients over the last few years, most were skeptical about restoration. The principal reason for this skepticism comes, I believe, as a result of the lack of information regarding the quality of restored windows, the cost involved, and the performance of restored windows. When we first started to promote restoration as an alternative to replacement, it was very difficult. Clients would listen politely but didn't really believe our claims about restoration and that we could successfully do it. And being in a period of learning ourselves, we lacked the necessary ammunition to make a compelling argument.
I'm an engineer. A building engineer, and I deal, most of my professional work is avoiding or solving problems with buildings, and we do a lot of building testing. My involvement with heritage buildings stems back actually to a request by a gentleman called Jean-Yves Tremblay from the National Capital Commission to do some window testing for him. He's a client. We went out and tested windows. They were old windows in an old building, and they leaked like sieves. Several months later, he called us back and said, can you come and retest those windows? So we did. And surprise, surprise, the windows, we retested them and they basically met modern performance levels in these old windows. In other words, he had repaired the windows to modern standards. When you look at the amount of energy that you use with a modern window, how much you lose out of a modern window, and compare it with, say, a very simple single glaze system, there is a lot of energy saving. But interestingly enough, when you look at the numbers, the energy savings hardly justify the cost of replacement over the long term. And when you look at a window that is, say, has a storm window where you've got the second layer of glazing there, those savings almost disappear. So it is hardly ever economically justified to replace windows just for the energy savings. I am not a trained building, conservator or conservationist. I'm an engineer. I work with all kinds of buildings. Yes, we do some heritage work, but I deal with the affordable housing, condominiums, and the whole gamut. When I'm talking about making decisions that we've been talking about here, those are performance and cost issues. The issues of heritage value, that's a whole separate layer. And what I'd like to get across is that the performance and economic decisions are often entirely consistent with the heritage requirement. Why change if it costs more, you don't get any better performance, and you're detracting from the heritage value of a building? Those questions have to be answered, and they're all consistent.
Old windows can be repaired and upgraded to improve their thermal performance and extend their service life. Decisions about windows should be based on a thorough condition survey and an exploration of repair and upgrade options.
In trying to preserve and upgrade historic windows, there's a range of interventions we can make. And you can probably categorize those interventions into two groups. One being the sort of the repair work and like woodwork repairs, or the reputtying of glass, or replacement of broken glass, or even the painting of a window. Those sorts of activities in one group. And then in the other group, sort of thermal upgrades, the addition of weather stripping to address infiltrating and exfiltrating air, and possibly the addition of something like a storm window to reduce heat loss by conduction and to reduce the convection currents that can occur at a cold glass surface.
All sorts of different kinds of windows have different kinds of problems. Those problems relate to the application, what's being asked of them, and how well they actually perform themselves. Most of the problems we have with windows result in are a performance problem resulting in a symptom. Unfortunately, there can be 3 or 4 different kinds of problems that create the same symptoms, and what you've got to really make sure that you're doing is solving the right problem. So when you have difficulty with a window where people are complaining about comfort, cold drafts, or you've got condensation on it, or whatever, you have to go and say why and get back to the real cause of the problem so you solve the right problem. Testing helps that way, and judgment helps. And it's not necessarily the fault of the window, and some quite modest adjustments in how the window is being used can make those problems go away.
Generally, the contractors or other carpenters come in, they look at these older windows, they say, oh, they're garbage. It makes me very angry. The old windows come into the shop, they look irreparable. In fact, we can take a very badly damaged window and restore it to make it look, in fact, brand new. General repairs are the sashes are loose, the joints are very loose. We take the sash apart, we sand the mortise and tenon, we repin them to make them tighter. We repin them, but we do not glue them because we want them to be able to be restored in another 50 years. Here we have a piece of bottom rail off a sash. Originally, the bottom rail looks in this shape with paint, lots of dirt, some corroding in the back. We've removed the paint, and we've consolidated this area in here. We've let it sit for 24 hours, and we've applied a epoxy repair, a 2-part epoxy compound. Here we've sanded it to make the original detail. And here we've put 2 coats of primer and 1 coat of finish coat paint on it. And I put it on the sash. I mark it. I use Dutchman repairs where there's heavy gouging or chips or rotted wood. I believe it's much more important to restore these windows than to put a new window in. As far as I'm concerned, the older windows are in fact superior to the newer windows, and I guarantee after I restore this, you're going to get another 100 years out of it.
Windows are missing or so damaged that repair is not an option. New windows that respect the materials, design, and joinery details of the originals can be built.
Well, if I can't repair a window, I will have to make a new one. So this involves milling the new stock, and then I have to find the right cutter for the profile. I usually have enough cutters on hand, but if I don't have one on hand, because sometimes it's an odd shape, so I'll have to go to the process of grinding one. Some windows will have mountain bars. Now that involves mortising with a small chisel for the mountain bars. Once all my pieces are cut to right length, then I'll dry fit them. Before I glaze it, I apply a layer of putty. The reason for applying putty is it seals the glass and stops the moisture from going in between the glass and the wood. So that's basically what's involved for reproducing a window.
Repairing old windows makes sense economically. A proper analysis of repair versus replacement costs must take into account initial capital costs, as well as maintenance costs and potential energy savings over the long term.
Conservationists have always had the heritage value argument to use when arguing for retention of old windows. I think based on the information that we've gleaned over the last few years, we now have very good information about the performance levels that can be achieved with old windows without compromising heritage character, and about the repairability of old windows. I think the most important thing is to get carpenters and building envelope specialists and architects and historians all working together to understand both the value of historic windows, the importance of them to the facade of the building, and what can be achieved with them.